Will you give me a drink? It's a simple question, isn't it? But on the lips of Jesus, it's genuine, respectful, and powerful. Will you give me a drink? It's a question that crosses boundaries and invites conversation. And it's a question that eventually leads to an entire village becoming curious about Jesus, because the woman Jesus asked for a drink is willing to share the story of her encounter with Jesus. And that is today's life hack to make you shine. Share your story. You may remember a few weeks ago, Lauren and Oliver told us at the Next Gen service that Jesus says that we are light and salt of the world. And this series, Life Hacks to Make You Shine, is to help us think through practical ways we can be salt and light in the world. And I love today's life hack, because we exist at Riverton Baptist to grow followers of Jesus, which means we need to be having conversations about Jesus with each other, that's important, but also with people who don't yet know Jesus. But very often when it comes to thinking about having conversations about Jesus, we begin to feel nervous or inadequate. And I think one of the reasons for that is because we've been trained to make presentations about Jesus rather than have conversations about Jesus. Maybe, like me, you were taught a gospel outline, something like the Roman road, a bridge to life, 4 spiritual laws. For me, it was 2 ways to live. And those tools are excellent in certain contexts. So at the end of a Billy Graham crusade, when you're counselling people who've come forward, that's useful. Or if you only have 2 minutes with a stranger who says to you, "Can you tell me what the gospel is?" Bam, that's your moment. But many of us don't find ourselves in those moments. We are living everyday lives talking to the same people we see all of the time. And these tools are kind of hard to get into conversation. Or at least that's my experience. You see, I am someone who is highly motivated to talk about Jesus. One of my gifts is the gift of evangelism. What gets me out of bed is that maybe today I'll get to tell someone about Jesus. Yet for all my years of trying to share Jesus with my friends and family and workmates, I can probably count on one hand the number of times I got through a presentation. And I don't even remember those times particularly fondly. They felt forced and they felt awkward. But worst of all, I felt like they closed doors. Because I presented my friend with their choice, you have 2 ways to live, and much to my surprise, they came up with a 3rd way, which was, I don't know. And it also felt like they didn't care. I was asking them to make a choice that they weren't ready to make. It really felt like I was just trying to tick a box. Yes, I told them the gospel. I thought there's got to be a better way. So some years ago, I shifted to storytelling. And I have found storytelling a very effective way of having conversations about Jesus. You see, storytelling, it allows us to be natural. We share stories with each other all of the time. And it allows me to be authentic because I'm sharing with my friend how Jesus has been active in my life. And that's what friends do, isn't it? They're authentic with each other. But it's also helped me to be relaxed because I'm not trying to tick a box anymore. I'm sharing a story about what Jesus has done in my life. And if my friend is interested, great. We can keep talking. And if they're not, we can keep talking. We're still friends. We're doing life together. And I will keep praying for my friend and praying for another opportunity to sow another seed. So to think about storytelling today, we are going to come to John chapter 4. But before we get to John chapter 4, I want to let you know that I know that John chapter 4 is theologically deep and rich. We could spend weeks in John chapter 4, but we're not going to. Because today's sermon is life hacks to make you shine, say it with story, not the eschatological views of the Samaritans in the Second Temple period. Maybe I'll be invited back for that one. My goal today is really simple. I want you to leave here with confidence that you can have better conversations and that your story is meaningful and powerful and worth sharing. So what we are going to do with John chapter 4 is we're going to look at how Jesus sets up the conversation, and then we're going to look at the woman's response to her conversation with Jesus. So we're going to look and see that Jesus finds common ground. He meets her in a common place, and the woman shares her story in a way that taps into a common longing. So let's begin. Will you give me a drink? It's a simple question, isn't it? But also controversial. How could Jesus be talking to this Samaritan woman? And John, who writes about this encounter, makes sure we do not want to miss the point that Jesus and this Samaritan woman should not be talking. He records the Samaritan woman's response. How can you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? And in case that's not clear enough, John follows it up with brackets saying, because Jews did not associate with Samaritans. Yet here they are, two people who have almost nothing in common, having a conversation. How could that be? Well, it's because they have almost nothing in common. They have common ground, both literally and symbolically. Literally, the ground they are standing on is common ground. It's Jacob's well. And it's something that unites their people. You have to go back a long way, back before Jews and Samaritans, back before the United Kingdom under King David, back before even the Israelites living as slaves in Egypt, all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God making promises that he was going to bless this world through this family. And this is what Jesus and the Samaritan woman have in common. They both are related to Abraham, and they both have the shared longing that God is still at work in the world and that his Messiah will come and set it right. That's represented by the place that they are standing, Jacob's well. But they have something else in common. Let me give you a hint. Will you give me a drink? It's a genuine question because Jesus is thirsty. They share humanity. They share the same kinds of longings and desires and wants and needs that we all have. And Jesus uses this common ground to unfold this conversation. What would it look like if we looked for common ground with the people we come across? In order to prepare this sermon, I did a bit of reading and research, and I found some recent study from America that says that 84% of people are willing to have a conversation with a Christian. I thought, that is amazing. 84%. That is nearly everyone you come across, isn't it? But the same study also found that the participants felt like Christians were unwilling and ill-equipped to have conversations with people who think differently to them. And at this point, I kind of just nodded. Because even though this is an American research, I feel like it rings true here in Australia. I think as a society in general, we are getting worse at having conversations with people who hold different views to us. And I think one of the ways that we see this is we are quick to label people. So we're throwing out words like woke or phobic or progressive or liberal or right-wing or left-wing or however you want to categorize people. But we're doing that, I think, to give ourselves an excuse to not have to engage with other people's points of views. It's us versus them. And it is killing conversation. But I think Jesus shows us a better way. Here he is, with every reason to be in conflict with this woman, but he's having a conversation because they have common ground. I have a friend who believes very differently to me. And I remember the day that we met. Some spiritual things came up in the conversation, and she began sharing with me the way she sees the world. And as I was listening, I was thinking, I have never heard anything like this before in my life. But it eventually got to a point where she said to me, you know, by now, most Christians have shut the conversation down. And it turns out she had a question about the Bible, but she'd never been in conversation with a Christian long enough to ask it. So now we had common ground. We found a way of talking about Jesus and the Bible in a way that was interesting to both of us. And we still continue to have those conversations today. What would it look like, instead of being so quick to point out how people are wrong, how their beliefs are false, if we looked for the good things in what they believe, the shared values, the same interests and the same passions? Wouldn't that be a great place to have conversation? Wouldn't that open doors to conversation? But there is something else that will help us open doors to conversation, and we see this in Jesus' approach to the woman as well. When Jesus asks for a drink, he's sitting at a well, a common place to gather, especially for women, and have conversations. If you want to know what's going on in the village, the well is where you find out. This woman and Jesus really should not be talking at all. Jews and Samaritans do not live in the same place. If Jesus had stayed in Jerusalem at the temple, it's unlikely he would be having this conversation with a Samaritan woman because firstly, she couldn't get in as far as Jesus could into the temple. But secondly, her religion didn't require her to be there anyway. But yet here they are having a conversation because Jesus had to go to Samaria. And what's interesting about this is that Jesus didn't have to go to Samaria at all. To travel north, he could have gone around Samaria like many Jews chose to do. So when John says Jesus had to go through Samaria, the implication seems to be that Jesus is getting out of his home turf and traveling to the turf of someone else. He's traveling to the place where somebody else feels comfortable and somebody else feels safe. The woman is the one with the bucket. This is where she comes. This is the place that she knows. And it's in this place that the conversation occurs. And it's important to note that the woman has a choice about whether this conversation takes place or not. Will you give me a drink? She's free to ignore Jesus. She's free to walk away. But she's also free to say yes and engage in conversation. We need to think, where are the wells in our society? Where are the places that our friends and family and workmates like to gather? The friend that I just mentioned, we met at the local public swimming pool. At the time, it was free to get into, and I had 4 young children. So guess who was there a lot? But I also went there because it was an easy place to meet my friends. Hey, do you want to meet at the pool? And even if I hadn't already keyed up meeting someone there, I knew the chances were fairly high that I would bump into someone I knew and be able to have conversations. Because that's what common places are. They're places where people gather and have conversations. So if you're finding it difficult to have conversations with people, and by this, I don't necessarily mean conversations about Jesus. I just mean conversations. You know, the things beyond the water cooler. Hey, how about them Bulldogs? Or how was your weekend? Meaningful conversations. Then maybe you need to think about the time and place. Because if you're at work, you're there to work. You need to work with integrity. And some of us are actually restricted in what we're able to say at work about our own spiritual beliefs. So maybe you need to be meeting your workmates outside on a Friday afternoon or take up a common hobby with them. The craft group is another example. It's a wonderful place to meet here, but the craft group is a group. And in Australia, we don't like having spiritual conversations in front of other people. It's a private thing. So maybe your friends from craft, you need to invite them out for a coffee or to go for a walk, that one-on-one scenario where you can really have a deep conversation and hear what they think. Or if you've been trying to have a conversation with your neighbor and you're waiting at the letterbox when they get home and they are tired and they just want to get inside, trust me, they are going to install an automatic roller door and avoid you. Maybe it's better to invite them over for a barbecue or to watch a game of football. Try and think about places where good conversation happens. And it may not be a place that you are necessarily comfortable, but it may be a place that they are comfortable, able to relax. So that's what Jesus does. Jesus looks for common ground and meets the woman in a common place. But now we're going to pivot. We're going to change from what Jesus does to look at what the woman does. And one of the reasons for that is because this conversation that Jesus has with the woman is extraordinary. It is the longest recorded conversation that Jesus has with someone. And as I mentioned before, it is theologically rich and deep. It touches on eschatology and worship and the history between 2 nations. And there's even a wedding motif there that alludes to Genesis. And Jesus seems to have some sort of supernatural insight into the woman's family situation. And to top it all off, he's winsome. Now, if you can have conversations like that, God bless you. Go for it. I'm very sorry you've had to sit in here listening to me. But not all of us are like Pastor Wayne. Some of us need something a little bit more achievable, which is why I think the woman's response to the conversation with Jesus is a more helpful thing to think through. She shares her story in a way that taps into a common longing. So she has this encounter with Jesus, this incredible conversation, and she rushes back to her village. And do you know what she says? You've been worshiping wrong this whole time. Nope. She seems to not even touch on the themes of this conversation she had with Jesus. She doesn't lecture them. She doesn't give them a presentation. She offers them an invitation. Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he be the Messiah? And I think she's tapping into the common longing, not just of expectations around the Messiah. The Samaritans clearly have some sort of hope that the Messiah is going to come today. But I think she taps into this longing of people wanting to be known and loved. Because you know what she says to them? Come and see, not just the Messiah, but a man who told me everything I ever did. Can you imagine meeting someone who knew everything you ever did? Most of us would imagine that encounter would be shameful and disempowering. But the woman has discovered when you meet Jesus, you are leaving that encounter feeling valued and honored. And she wants to share this with her village. Come and see a man who knew everything I ever did, being known and loved. It's possible. Come and see. And I think when we share our stories this way, when we tap into the common longing that we all have as humans, people become curious about Jesus. Come and see the man who helped me with my anxiety. Come and see the man who gave my life direction and purpose. Come and see the man who helped me when I was sick, who helped me through my grief. Could he be someone who can help you too? One day I shared my story with someone. We'd been chatting and he ended up pointing out that he seemed to think I was quite a calm and well put together person. And I said, oh, well, you should have known me when I was a young woman. I used to hate myself. I spent many nights on my bedroom floor crying. But I met Jesus and he changed my life. Not an awful lot came of it in that conversation. He was interested, but the conversation moved on. But shortly after, he called me. And he said, you told me that Jesus changed your life, and I want to know if he can change my life too. Your stories are powerful. You are holding out hope to your friends and family, saying this is possible for you too. Come and see. I believe you each have stories of encounters with Jesus that you can share. And if we look for common ground with people, and we meet people in common places when they're open to talk, and if we share our stories in ways that tap into common longings, we are going to be part of growing followers of Jesus. And if you're not sure where to start, can I suggest that it may be as simple as, will you give me a drink?